West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I'm pleased to be with Harry Littman of @TalkingFeds on YouTube, who also sits at the intersection of law and politics. I'm Michael Popak. I'm so pleased, longtime listener, first-time caller, Harry, and I'm really pleased to be here with you. I'm a big fan of your work and your background as federal prosecutor, U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney, line prosecutor. You got it all, and you bring it all together on that @TalkingFeds. And I thought this was a great opportunity with all the developments that have happened just in the last couple of hours in the D.C. election interference case presided over by Judge Chutkan with special counsel Jack Smith. He's filing things that we expected, some of which we didn't expect, a new process that's in place, and you and I trying to read the tea leaves about what it all means. And an order by Judge Chutkan. We thought we were going to do a hot take and talk about things through the Talking Feds lens, about 180-page filing. Now we learn there's a giant appendix, and we're not going to see the 180 pages, but we can glean some things from what Jack Smith has filed in his moving papers. Why don't you tell the audience all about that?
Yeah, well, really, Michael, when we were talking, you're the one who pointed out to me, they've given Trump an extra chunk of time, 10 days until the 10th, to respond on the appendix. And that's a pretty good indication that as just thinking about it, that it's a real doorstop. That's what tends to repose in appendices, just big old documents. But it's important to note the government is treating them differently. So the way we got here, they filed their 180-page brief, which they get special leave to do, and Trump opposes. And it seemed to me the immediate question was, would any evidence in there be made public and before the election? Because people have been talking about having a trial. Then they were talking about a mini trial. None of that is in the offing, but it may well be that it's certainly true that in that 180-page text, there's some characterization, say, of Michael Pence's testimony in the grand jury or Mark Meadows' testimony. Recall that he partially cooperated with Jack Smith without an immunity agreement. There's some incendiary stuff in there, you can be sure. And what happened is, by the protective order that Chutkan had entered long ago, after they made this filing, you just go automatically to the redaction stage because their filing was with redactions, and that represents what they say should be protected, even if, Judge, you make this public. And that's now exactly what's being litigated. So to the extent, if they were to win this motion outright and win it before the election, some really explosive stuff would emerge about Trump. And that's the eye that everyone should, that's the ball that everyone should keep their eye on now. What could come out? Okay, so basically the law here is, before we think about immunity, the law is there's a standard kind of legal rule and a 6-part test under the Hubbard case for when materials should stay redacted, notwithstanding what is a general public right to have transparency in the process. And I think you are going to see here, Michael, not just the DOJ, but media representatives with hotshot white shoe lawyers coming in to argue for it. And what the department has basically said in its motion about redaction is, we're going to redact names of people unless they're in the superseding indictment. So Mike Pence's name is not redacted, but basically witnesses who could be identified by Trump or crazy lone wolf Trump partisans, and they could be put in danger. That's the main thing. And then in the appendices themselves, they're going to redact like all sort of chunks of sensitive materials. But as I read their motion, they're going to do summaries of, for example, grand jury testimony or other things they rely on in saying in their 180-page motion, this is not immunized, which is, remember, the basic issue before the court. And that, to me, is what Trump is going to fight tooth and nail. So it's going to be really interesting to see what is his next move, because he's not thinking primarily about what's immediately, in the long run sensitive or not. He's thinking about information not coming out, no October surprise. You could analogize to Jim Comey, who made those gratuitous statements about Hillary Clinton in October of 2016. If by just operation of law and the normal presumption of public access, some of this 180-page brief comes out and it say, for example, summarizes Mike Pence's testimony in the grand jury, man, oh man, that's going to be really explosive and play into the election for the same reasons people have thought that a trial would. He's been able to forestall in every way. This is his final fighting ground. Can he keep this evidence from being just put forward in the motion to deal with the immunity determination of paragraph by paragraph what should be immune? And I see him trying at his first opportunity to just freeze the linebackers and get it up to friendlier, more hospitable for him climbs, DC Circuit, but especially potentially the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, I agree with you, Harry. He's been in every paper he's filed. He's done exactly what Judge Chutkan told him not to do. He uses every paper in the last 3 weeks to argue, Judge, just dismiss this on immunity grounds. You don't need to do any work. Don't let him file a brief, that bad person, special counsel Jack Smith, and don't let him file an appendix. That's even worse. Don't put any of this evidence into the public record, and certainly not before the election. Do it another way. And we don't like the way you're doing it. Let's take up on appeal and see if we can stop it, because we don't want any. So they're going to argue, as you outlined, and Ben and I were talking about it too. They're going to argue on some sort of appeal that the whole process that Judge Chutkan has established with her briefing schedule and allowing the government to go first and put in all this evidence to prove on the indictment, because I think you would probably agree. Normally, an indictment has to rise and fall in its own merits in the four corners of an indictment. You don't normally, as a prosecutor, when you need to defend your indictment, you're not able to say, but there was this great grand jury testimony that well, where is it in the indictment? Well, it's not there. Well, okay, that's evidence for trial, but you got to get over the hump of your indictment surviving a motion to dismiss. But this is not a motion to dismiss being brought by a defendant. Yeah. This is a defense of a superseding indictment and a call for immunity non-application by the special prosecutor. That's why Chutkan is allowing 2 briefs. And then some people might be saying, well, if there's a page limit for briefs, is there a page limit for appendix? No. Yeah. And I've been known to file thousands of pages.
As has the Department of Justice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, what happened to the 145 pages? Like, well, no, or 180 pages. No, I'm sorry. That doesn't count this mountain of evidence I'm going to present. So I agree with you. I think John Sauer is going to try to take it up. First stop, DC Court of Appeals. Having the Supreme, let me ask you this question, Harry. The Supreme Court having previously rejected Jack Smith's attempt to skip a step and go right to the Supreme Court initially in this case, which got us to the DC Court of Appeals, the immunity decision, and all the delays. Do you think that even this right-wing Supreme Court is going to allow him to take a direct appeal to the Supreme Court on this issue of briefing and redaction?
My best guess is he won't try. And then into the D.C. Circuit, we know where they were before, and very much with Judge Chutkan, a bipartisan panel, impeccably reasoned. But here can't come the 9 to really clobber them. And we actually had a leaked memo in the case where Chief Justice Roberts advised all his colleagues, the other 8, that he just tore the DC Circuit's reasoning to shreds. I think very illogically, or very, it just portended what they were going to do with immunity. And that is the basic battle here. They've come out and done the regular process as the DOJ. Here's the Hubbard case. Here are the 6 factors. What Trump is going to say is, we're talking immunity here. USA versus Trump changed the entire landscape. You can't talk about this anymore, because if you even let this evidence out of the bag, that is the opprobrium, that's the word he used, and the court adopted of the in the election, that will fall on him. Because if you think about it, what is it about evidence, even if it's immune or shouldn't come forward, why shouldn't that be made public? All the time, every day, courts consider evidence to consider should it go before a jury. That's a public process when they do that. And even if they decide the jury can't see it for whatever reason, that doesn't mean the people can't. But Trump is going to argue for a much broader right, having to do with it not even coming to the public at all. That's a whole, new kind of extension of immunity. The immediate, practical, nerdy question here, Michael, is, can he make the argument long enough to run out the clock on November 5th? Because that's the real goal here.
Yeah, and we have a October 10th cutoff date for the judge, just to get Trump, and then she's going to have her work cut out for her and her clerks, because she's going to have to do line reading of the 2 comparisons while maybe dealing with these appellate issues.
And this is just the redactions, right? But you're 100% right. This is a painstaking plotting process, and they want the DOJ and Chutkan for it to go up only 1 more time.
That's right.
And Trump will be happy with 11 more times. It's a mess.
It is Monday, the 30th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special River City Hash Mondays, because, well, the weekend happened, and now it's Monday, so here we are. Hey, I'm beginning to think that maybe those climate change hurricanes are not a hoax. Boy, talk about a storm surge. That was one hell. It's still going. And I remember some hurricanes when Trump was president. In North Carolina, where there's major damage and deaths, he withheld federal help. Roy Cooper, Democratic governor at the time, same now. He, being Trump, withheld federal aid for over 2 weeks while people were, sitting in their flooded homes. But who do they think, and when I say they, you know who we mean, because it's certainly not the bulk of America, but who do they think performs better during these disasters. Yeah. That's how you know the brainwashing works. Trump can simply go out there and say, I just don't think that Kamala, or he doesn't say Kamala, he says Kamala is a is really an unintelligent person. I'm smart. And people believe that bullshit because I'll tell you why. Trump is smarter than they are. And that's all you need to know. Okay? For those of us who don't consider Trump to be our superior in the, well, intelligence department, we can only snicker. Is that all that we can do? I think we can do a little bit more, and we have. But apparently this guy can just do this, and he gets away with it. People just believe this BS from the very beginning. I never believed this BS that this guy, first of all, anybody who feels the need to go out there and publicly proclaim they're the richest person in the world and then pays off Forbes or whatever he was doing, it smacked of being fake because it was. I don't know. My experience is that people really don't want a whole lot of people to know that they're rich because you never know when you're going to get jacked. That's one way to look at it, huh? No, this guy's just right out there. He had some sort of hole in his soul he had to fill. It was so glaringly obvious from the very beginning. I couldn't stand it. Maybe it was the hippie in me and the punk. Mix those together and hypocrisy just is, oh God. It smells like a skunk. You can't avoid it. All you can do is get through it. Mm-hmm. The only problem is that after a while, even the bad smell of a skunk disappears because you get used to it. It just becomes part of the normal background. To the point now, we have people who proudly proclaim that they will vote for the felon because it's kicking the libs. Ultimately, that's what they mean. But, well, not ultimately. That's a nice little, I don't know, side gig. Oh, yeah, we get fun. We have a lot of fun kicking the libs. But what it really means is that they have permission to be racist, misogynist, bigots, xenophobes, etc., etc., etc. To the point where a major candidate for the president of the United States can call for a national day of bloodletting. He wants to have a purge. And we're supposed to act like that's normal. That it's Kamala Harris that can't be trusted. We just don't know what her values are, really. So we have people that think that this is perfectly fine. Oh, we get to have a national day of bloodletting? Good. I've got a list of Democrats that we might want to purge on that day. They'll never bother us again. I would really like to have a purge, a nonviolent one, of course, of all these Nazis. This Russian agitprop that has, I don't know. There seems to be a certain level of consciousness that is susceptible to that kind of brainwashing. Why is that? Because it appeals to some lizard brain part of them? Boy, I gotta tell you, I tried to, at the very least, train my lizard brain not to be bigoted, not to be misogynistic, not to be xenophobic, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, maybe that's what makes we of similar mindset humans. Maybe that's what it is. So am I calling all these MAGA Nazis subhuman? I don't know. I really don't know. What do you do with people who have a sub-intellect but are such odorous? Oh, you just can't be around them. I mean, I can understand it if someone has, terrible intellectual deficiencies through no fault of their own, who are just sweet, loving individuals, and all you want to do is take care of them. These people, and yeah, I'm calling them these people, share none of those qualities. It's unbelievable. Over the weekend, one of our neighbors who has more of a liberal bent, I think she got drunk and decided to post some political BS on the town Facebook page, in which we pretty much tried to keep the Republican Russian propaganda from seeping in this election cycle, because they have ever since Trump hit the national stage, when he came down that gilded staircase and said, "I'm running on racism, bigotry, and hate. Anybody wants to come on a board? Here we are. Let's go." And they did. So for the first time, somehow, I've made it this far and have not been suspended by Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. Right at the beginning of an election. Well, I mean, when it really gets down to brass tacks. The last month of every election for 10 years, I've been suspended on social media, and it just seemed a little too cute by half. For ridiculous things. Fighting back against an actual Nazi, and I was construed, and I'm not talking about being violent, none of that. I was being construed as harassing the Nazi, who came onto my timeline, did their stuff, and I'm sure it was a Russian bot or a Chinese bot. I'm pretty sure wherever it came from, it wasn't from the United States of America. And the algorithm put me in the hopper, and it had every single time. And this time, somehow, a lot of us are still around. So over the weekend, our neighbor posted a meme, basically saying anybody who's going to vote for a felon is stupid. And of course, people took exception with that, because stupid people would. And I did not want to get involved in this, because I made a vow that any political BS on the town Facebook page will be met with 3 successive music YouTube videos, so it pushes that post down the page. And so I did. But boy, the people that responded, the MAGAs, they were just, I will say there were a few liberals too that pushed back. That was okay. I just didn't want to get involved, because I noticed that some of the usual suspects did not get involved. So I'm hoping that will remain the case. I expect now to see a slew of MAGA spam right from Tenet Media, the sanctioned media company that's been in cahoots with Russians, which also brings up another point about just weeks ago, the DOJ identified a dozen or more right-wing, quote, influencers who are getting paid by Russia. And they're still out there doing their biz. Do they have a First Amendment right? Is that what it is? They're all Axis Sallies? I thought Axis Sally would have been arrested if we could have found her at the time. Tokyo Rose. I think they wanted to get Tokyo Rose too. So why is Tim Pool and all these other people who are getting paid by Russia to do their BS? Well, they're doing their BS because I guess it's right before the election, and you can only mess up the Democratic party with lies. Oh, but her emails. Oh, well, you know what? We checked and there was nothing in her emails. Sorry. Go ahead. Keep doing what you're doing. Remember that. So, the MAGAs around here resorted to this time-worn strategy of reminding us, do you know what town you're living in? Well, I sure wanted to respond. You mean the town that would go onto people's property armed because they were flying a pride flag, telling them that they couldn't do that here because this is a conservative town? A town that was once part of the sundown towns back in the day. Grants Pass was a sundown town up to the 70s. I've mentioned this before. Grants Pass was a place that Cottonmouth would not play. We played in Ashland, where the Shakespearean Music Festival is. We played there plenty. We would not play Grants Pass because they were a sundown town about up to 1975. Rogue River was a sundown town up to 40s or so, which means that they were a sundown town for a lot longer after that, and now people are still pissed off. So, yeah, we're reminded what kind of neighbors we have. But I like to remind folks, I live in the fucking United States of America. And the town I live in is in America. And I refuse to let any dipshits tell me how I'm supposed to live my life in America. Of course, I will not put any yard signs of my political persuasion out because, yeah, I don't want my house firebombed. You never know what's possible around here. I've already experienced bullshit during Vietnam and Nixon. Had my car firebombed. I've mentioned that before. That sucked. Crosses burned on our lawn when my parents started the first ACLU chapter in the San Gabriel Valley in 1965. That was fun. Bottles thrown at us kids as we walked home from school. They knew who we were. Yelling out, "Enter lover." I was thinking, except for the N-word, what's the prob? So, my experience is that it's not Antifa coming to town to change everybody into being a commie. It's a bunch of racist bigots going out telling people you can't do this because this is a conservative town. Oh, really? Fuck off. Excuse my French. But I'm over it. There's no joy in MAGA Naziville. There isn't any. So they did get 3 successive music videos. And then people responded, so then I had to give 3 more. Because when you respond, it pushes that post up to the top of the page, and then I made a vow. But a lot of MAGA signs out, and every time another tremendously large rally for Harris and Waltz is out there, and then Trump can't even get like 100 people in the basement of a bowling alley now. Well, if you're So, as I like to say, if you're going to gutter ball campaign, what do you expect? Yeah, what do you expect? All right, we could rant more and more, but we actually did take the time to curate a show, so why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, despite rampant political divisiveness nationwide, Oregonians share at least one common belief: public education is important. Yeah, don't tell the usual suspects here in Rogue River. They'll say it's all lies. Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. U.S. retailers brace for the potential pain from a longshoremen's strike. Yeah, that's going on. I thought I'd bring it up. And Hurricane Helene could have widespread consequences for homeowners, the private insurance industry, and the federal flood insurance program. Well, every time. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the main Czech opposition coalition, led by former populist Prime Minister Andrej Babis, won an election Saturday for a third of the seats in Parliament's upper house. Problem with Babis is that he's already come out and said, "We don't like Ukraine." Initially they did, but then Vlad got to him, so we'll see how that shakes out. And the streets of Paris were filled with activists rallying in support of the right to abortion for women across the world. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. If you follow me on social media at Justice Putnam, you'll have quick access to the show notes and links diaries that I post 10 minutes before showtime, so you have quick access to the actual reportage by the actual reporters. So do follow me at Justice Putnam. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. It is out of Oregon Public Broadcasting by Natalie Pate. Significant political divides persist across the country, but Oregonians share at least one common belief: public education is important. That's one big takeaway from a recent survey conducted by the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. This spring, the center, which describes itself as an independent, nonpartisan nonprofit, conducted a statewide survey to gauge how Oregonians feel about public education priorities and planning. The research was conducted in partnership with Portland-based children's nonprofit Foundations for a Better Oregon. The survey gathered online feedback in April and May from more than 1,600 Oregon residents ages 18 and older. The results were released this last week. The past 5 years have been exceptional, mostly not in a positive way, Amory Vogel, the executive director of the Beliefs Center, wrote in an email to Oregon Public Broadcasting. Schools have faced several challenges in that time: COVID-19, teacher strikes, severe storms, and budget cuts, to name a few. But this year also marks the 5th anniversary of Oregon's Student Success Act, the statewide education initiative funded by a corporate tax solely for schools, was supposed to be a game changer. Folks like Vogel wanted to study the effects 5 years in, but that wasn't entirely possible. The events of the last 5 years, she said, complicated their ability to ask about changes people have or have not seen as a result of the act. The waters are too muddied, she said. But Vogel knew people still cared. The center has seen a high level of concern about Oregon's public education system in its surveys, she said, even those that have little or nothing to do with education. So instead, they decided to investigate whether Oregonians even still align with the values, priorities, and solutions that were discussed in community engagement sessions back in 2018 and 2019, the feedback that was used to shape the Student Success Act. With a high level of concern, she said, understanding what people see as a path forward becomes crucial. The results aren't necessarily surprising. The center has been asking similar questions for 30 years and has found strong consensus over the value of public education in that time. However, the results are noteworthy considering political divides that continue to crop up across the state and country, from book bans to abortion access. According to the survey, Oregonians tend to agree more often than not about issues affecting local schools. Responding to the prompt, it's important for schools to support student health, safety, and sense of belonging, 90% agreed. Rates varied slightly depending on where respondents were in the state. For example, more people in the South Willamette Valley strongly agreed than those on the South Coast or Southern Oregon. Yeah, where I'm at. When survey questions got more specific, the results showed more variation. One statement read, it's important to increase instructional time for K through 12 students. The data showed that 75% of respondents somewhat or strongly agreed. Those who do not work in the education realm agreed with that even more. The results show most Oregonians want schools to be held to a high standard and that statewide accountability measures should be in place. However, a very small number of respondents felt those measures should be punitive. I wonder who that would be. We want people to suffer pain. Oh, really? Let me guess who you are. Only 12% of respondents wanted to withhold funding, revoke licenses, or take punitive actions until struggling schools and districts demonstrate improvement. But they won't do the same with charter schools because they are unregulated. Don't even get me involved in the debate about homeschooling and its regulatory process. The largest area of disagreement or uncertainty was about whether school districts are improving and in using their resources well. Less than half, 48%, think they are, whereas 35% believe they are not. About 17% they just didn't know. If you want to know, go to OregonVBC.org to read the full survey findings and quotes from the respondents on the importance of community engagement. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Tom Kreischer from the Associated Press. With a dockworkers' strike threatening to close ports on the East and Gulf Coast beginning this week, Chris Butler is growing worried. Butler is CEO of the National Tree Company, and like many businesses, he is counting on shipments that are en route from Asia but won't reach their ports before an expected strike by longshoremen starting at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. The company, based in New Jersey, is an importer of artificial Christmas trees and other holiday decorations. If a strike were to last just a few days, there might be time afterward to unload the trees, transport them to warehouses, and have them ready for customers this season. Yet, if a strike were to keep ports closed until, say, November, about 150,000 trees might not arrive in time for the peak shopping season, imposing costs on National Tree and other businesses. In a worst-case scenario, those costs, multiplied across industries, could fuel inflation and pressure the U.S. economy. definitely not an ideal situation, Butler said. National Tree already has stockpiled or delivered most of the roughly 2 million artificial trees it sells each year, but it would lose revenue if 150,000 of those trees got stuck in the pipeline. Other businesses face the same predicament, with goods that could be stranded at sea if 45,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association make good on their threat to strike. They could shut down 36 ports from Maine to Texas that handle about half the goods shipped into and out of the United States. West Coast workers on the docks belong to a different union and are not involved in the strike. A prolonged strike would force companies to pay shippers for delays, and goods could arrive too late for the high point of holiday shopping season. On Friday, top Biden administration officials met with port operators and told them they should negotiate with the union ahead of Tuesday, according to a White House official. Butler says he's hoping for an agreement or for government intervention to halt a strike, but the U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents shippers and ports, and the Longshoremen's Union have not met since June, and no talks are scheduled before their contract expires late today. And Brianna Sachs at the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. When Hurricane Helene slammed into Florida on Thursday night, it made landfall in the state's sparsely populated Big Bend, far from the glittering cities with expensive waterfront property to the south. But that did not stop Helene from becoming another multi-billion-dollar superstorm. The hurricane's massive size and record-breaking storm surge left an equally massive footprint of destruction across the southeast, from Florida's Tampa Bay region to Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. The storm probably caused $15 billion to $26 billion in property damage, as well as another $5 billion to $8 billion in lost economic output, Moody's Analytics said. Although it is too early to know the full extent of the damage, experts said the storm could have major consequences for homeowners, the private insurance industry, and the federal flood insurance program. In Florida, we have seen so many companies go belly up because of disasters, said Amy Bach, executive director of United Policyholders, a consumer advocacy group. As some companies have abandoned the market, new ones have moved in, but Bach said these new players have less experience paying claims and less capital to draw from than the big national carriers. A wave of new insurance claims could send them into bankruptcy. Please go and read the full article by following my social media feed at Justice Putnam, and you'll get to the show notes and links diaries, which will then get you to this Washington Post article. It's not as roundabout as it sounds. Nonetheless, it is now time for our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
SpeakeasyNetworksRadio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, David Cronenberg, Move Over. If body horror isn't your thing, steer clear of The Substance. Director Carl Lee Fergeet is a fan of King Cronenberg, and his influences on this one are apparent. However, unlike her idol, Fergeet is focusing on a very real horror. Female aging in a society obsessed with youth. Here, our protagonist, the wonderfully named Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, is a former actress turned TV fitness show host. Elizabeth is unceremoniously fired on her 50th birthday because, as she's told by her male boss, once a woman is 50, she no longer, quote, has it. After being involved in a car accident, Elizabeth learns about a new, life-changing procedure involving the substance. Her life certainly has changed after taking it. She literally, and in a grisly fashion, becomes two people. The new person, named Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, is a younger, hotter version of Elizabeth. Although the two beings are separate, they are one person, and neither can survive without the other. However, that's quickly forgotten once Sue steps into the role of Elizabeth's old job and tries to live life to the fullest. Casting Demi Moore, an actress well known for facing misogyny in the 90s and who's been vocal about body image and disordered eating issues, and who by all accounts looks amazing for 62, is nothing less than brilliant. Arguably, Moore gives the best performance of her career here. There's a real vulnerability on display, and depth best shown when Elizabeth is preparing for a date, but can't escape the image of her other self, Sue gazing out at her on a huge billboard. While The Substance may not be for everyone, its nuanced message about the pressure on women to remain perpetually young-looking is something that should resonate with half the population, and maybe far more. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. The FCC levied a $6 million fine September 26th for an AI deepfake robocall in January's New Hampshire presidential primary. And on the eve of a civil trial, conservative outlet Newsmax settled a lawsuit with voting machine maker Smartmatic. In February, we reported on a robocall using an AI-generated voice of President Joe Biden, urging citizens not to vote in the New Hampshire presidential primary. After a federal and state investigation, the FCC fined Steve Kramer, the political consultant allegedly behind the scheme, $6 million. A separate $1 million fine was levied on Lingo Telecom in August. Kramer also faces felony charges in New Hampshire. Just days before a civil trial was to begin, conservative outlet Newsmax settled with optical ballot machine maker Smartmatic September 26th. Like Dominion Voting Systems, Smartmatic's machines were falsely implicated in a 2020 voter fraud conspiracy theory driven by former President Trump's false claims about the election. Those claims were widely aired on Newsmax, Fox News, and other outlets. No settlement terms were disclosed. Fox News and Fox Corporation, which settled with Dominion Voting Systems for $787 million, also faces a $2.7 billion suit by Smartmatic, a case likely to be heard in 2025. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1892. That was the day that 29 leaders of the Homestead Steel Strike in Pennsylvania were charged with treason against the state. If you're a regular listener to Labor History in 2, you've heard about this strike before. The strike occurred because the steel company decided to reduce wages and crush the emerging union. When the workers refused to accept a pay cut, company manager Henry Clay Frick laid off the entire workforce. He hired Pinkerton guards to protect the strikebreakers. But the workers of Homestead were not so easily put out of the plant. They fought back against the Pinkertons. 9 workers were killed, as were 7 Pinkertons. Many more were injured on both sides. Strike leaders stood trial for murder. The jury found them innocent. But 29 strike leaders were arrested again. This time, they were charged with treason. During the trial, the Chief Justice Justice of Pennsylvania instructed the grand jury, when a large number of men arm and organize themselves by divisions and companies, appoint officers, and engage in a common purpose to defy the law, to resist its officers, and to deprive any portion of their fellow citizens of the rights to which they are entitled, it is a levying of war against the state, and the offense is treason. Despite this charge to the grand jury, the jury again refused to convict these strike leaders. However, paying legal fees and bail drained the strike finances. While leaders were kept in jail, the morale of the strike was broken. The Homestead steel mills were not unionized until well into the 20th century. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid to upper 80s. Should be plentiful sunshine throughout the day, winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight with lows near 50, winds light and variable. We will be under a red flag warning beginning in another couple of hours, continuing through at least tomorrow, Tuesday, which means we expect hot enough weather and dry enough weather that we could have wildfires, and we don't want that. So mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the low 90s, winds light and variable, hoping they don't pick up because of wildfire danger. Barometric pressure, ragweed pollen is rated high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 20 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. And now, barometric pressure is falling at 30.22 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 78%, expecting to dry out much more as we go through the day. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 59 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 63 and cloudy. Rome is 75 degrees and sunny. Kabul is 64 and clear. Hong Kong is 67 and cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 58 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and sunny with a heat advisory. They expect to get into the mid-80s. That's really hot there. Chicago, Illinois is 71 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 67 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. The main Czech opposition group, led by former populist Prime Minister Andrej Babis, won an election on Saturday for a third of the seats in Parliament's upper house, the Senate. The ruling coalition of Prime Minister Petr Fiala still retained a majority in the Senate. With all the votes from the two-day ballot counted, Babis's ANO, or Yes in English party, won 8 of the 27 seats up for grabs in the 81-seat Senate in the two-round election. It's the first time the centrist movement won that many seats in the chamber. The results are a boost for Babis. Ahead of next year's parliamentary elections, ANO has been the most popular party and is favored to win that vote. The candidates linked to a coalition won 15 seats. Parliament's lower house dominates the legislative process, but the Senate plays an important role in passing constitutional amendments and approving constitutional court judges. In a separate vote last week, ANO dominated Czech regional elections, winning 10 of the 13 regions contested. The current Czech government firmly stands behind Ukraine after it was invaded by Russia. The country has donated arms, including heavy weapons, to the Ukrainian armed forces and is behind a plan to acquire artillery shells Ukraine badly needs from countries outside the European Union. Some 320,000 refugees from Ukraine currently live in Chechnya, and Babis is on record, and his party as well, of not supporting Ukraine. Shante at the Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Hundreds of people came out in Paris on Saturday, marching in support of the right to abortion for women across the world, just 6 months after France became the first country to guarantee in its constitution a woman's right to voluntarily terminate a pregnancy. The protest, organized by civil society groups to mark International Safe Abortion Day, also called for greater and easier access to abortion in France, denouncing budget cuts, staff reductions, and the closure of abortion centers and maternity wards, which organizers say all contribute to penalizing women. Sarah Duracher, president of France's not-for-profit family planning services, said French women sometimes have to travel to another region to access the medical services needed to abort, denouncing the obstacle course they sometimes face. Thibaut Thomas, said, aged 28, said the ongoing trial of a man who has confessed to drugging his wife so that dozens of men could rape her while she was unconscious was one of the reasons that motivated him to attend the protest on Saturday. There is a mood in France, a particular context with the Mazan trial, he said, referring to the name of the small Provence town where the couple had bought their retirement home and where the repeated rapes occurred. This sweeps away all the excuses or all the mitigating circumstances that we thought could have existed before, Thomas said. In fact, it is something broader, generalized. earlier this year, France became the only country to explicitly guarantee a woman's right to voluntarily terminate a pregnancy when lawmakers overwhelmingly approved a bill to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution. Abortion in France has been legal since 1975 and enjoys wide support across most of the political spectrum. Enshrining the right in the Constitution sought to prevent the kind of rollback seen in the United States in recent years. Still, many in the protest Saturday said the right to abort could never be taken for granted, especially at a time when far-right nationalist parties are gaining influence in France and other European countries. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.